Hello, my name is Dennis, and I've chosen to speak today about overhauling an entry-level reel that will provide years of service if it's well maintained. It's a typical reel that you could find at a garage or a yard sale or a flea market, or perhaps you even have one similar to that. I picked the Daiwa A130RL for an example because of its simplicity. It's a reel that was made about 10 years ago, so you will find them in the garage sales pretty cheap, and it's one that I consider almost bulletproof. It has a limited number of moving parts, and it's a very simplistic design where unless you have a mechanical failure, either a breakage in the handle, breakage on the reel seat, or some other problem, perhaps with the bail, will last forever because it's not over-engineered, but it's well built. What I'll do is I'm going to disassemble this, show you how to keep track of your parts, show you a logical progression in terms of repair and maintenance, and hopefully provide you with the confidence to go ahead and do that for the reels that you own. Before I get started, I want to just suggest some things that I use normally in my repair practice. Starting with some safety stuff, and that would be a general purpose latex glove. I like to keep the oils and lubricants off of my hands. It does make it a little bit more cumbersome when you are doing the work because you lose grips and things on small parts, but at the end of the day I prefer that over getting my hands dirty and all oiled up. Secondly is a variety of products and some things that I've just grown accustomed to doing in my repair. A parts tray. Believe it or not, it's simply a piece of the bottom of a milk jug. But if you can keep track of all your parts and keep them in one place, that will work well. And then the other ones are just general cleaning and lubricants that you would want to use on your reel, assuming that you have the basic tools. And in this case, this reel is so basic, all you need is a Phillips head screwdriver and a small common flathead screwdriver. But I'll use, for this purpose, I'll use some reel grease, some oil. If it's dirty inside, we'll go use a chrome polish, which I like as a mild abrasive. I would use that with a little scrubby pad to take any hardcore grit and grime off. And also a multi-purpose degreaser and cleaner, and I found this Purple Power works very well. Also, as a general lubrication or sticky parts, particularly on a handle, something like a WD-40 or another type of multi-purpose oil is fine. So let's start with the reel. The reel again is the A130RL by Daiwa, and again very simplistic. In this case, handles can be mounted two ways. Either it can be screwed in from the side, or it can be screwed in on the main gear. This one happens to be screwed in on the main gear, and as a result you simply reverse the turn and bring the handle off. That would be part one. And in this case there's two washers that fit inside of the handle for making it easier to turn. Behind that then is the basic reel body. I would take the spool off first. That's by untightening the drag knob and removing the spool. And in this case you can see that we have the main shaft, and some reels will have a nut underneath this, but again this one's simplicity, and you'll see as we take it apart that there's only several moving parts in the reel itself. So we have three Phillips head screws, which would be the next point. We're going to remove those now. If you do a lot of this, you could use a mechanical Phillips head screwdriver. I do that if I have a lot of reels to go do, but for now, just a handheld screwdriver is fine. And once you have those screws out, again, if you put them in that parts bucket, you're going to find that you're not going to be looking for them on the floor or some other place where they may fall. Once you remove that reel plate, you can see the inner workings of this reel. There's only a few moving parts. The first one here, this is an anti-reverse dog. It's held on by a spring and a screw, and the function of that is to stop the reel from going backwards and it moves like this on the internal teeth. Again, this is probably the simplest reel you're going to find out there. The next step would be to pull this small connecting pin which holds your spool shaft. I use pliers for that because I have the gloves on, but if you have better dexterity than I, you can pull that pin simply using your fingers. And again, it's a pin that's just it's going to run in the shaft. Once you do that, you can pull the main spool shaft out, and that'll give you access to the gears. So now we have the one that rides this shaft up and down, and your main gear. So that's it. That's your moving parts. So the next thing you want to do is check for grease and dirt. In this case, this reel's pretty clean, but what I would do is take some of that residual dirt that's in the way, and one of my tools that I like is a little Q-tip. And I would just simply clean those residuals off of that. I would also like to check at this time any dirt in the bale carrier. So there's in this case, there's a little keyway that comes here that holds that shaft in, and that removes the bale carrier. So underneath the bale carrier, you can see the drive for it, which looks pretty clean, and there's no accumulated oil or grease or the like on that. So I'm going to simply take my lubricant and just put a little cleaning flow on that where it's going to turn, which is up top, and a little lubricant on the gear drive itself. I'm just going to simply replace that. Reverse the order, drive that back in, take the keyway, move that back into the reel. And again, if you're working with the gloves, sometimes it's a little difficult to grab these finer points, but it's worth it over time to use the protection. Okay, we have the keyway back in place. Next, you want to inspect the main gear, look for any damaged teeth. In this case, there aren't any. Sometimes there's an accumulation of dust and grime and excess lubrication behind it. You want to clean that out. In this case, this one's clean. And simply re-lube it again using the reel grease. So I'm going to put a little bit on the drive side and the reverse side. Now, one of the things that makes this reel a very simple reel is that it doesn't have bearings. You'll notice up top when we pulled this away, it's got the main pinion drive is associated right with the bale drive, and the two sides are actually bushings. On the higher end reels, you would have bearings on both sides to make it an easier turning wheel. However, this is an entry-level reel, and it's not uncommon to see that. So once you've re-lubed that, you place it into the bearing on, the bushing on the one side, and then you're ready to bring that shaft back down and replace that. Make sure that that's clean and that any residual dirt and the like may be off that. I notice there's a little bit of dirt here, so I'm simply going to clean that with a paper cloth. I'm going to bring that back into the top of the reel, making sure that everything comes through fine, and then to reinsert the carrier arm for that spool. It loops over the top of the main gear and then aligns with the hole in the shaft. Remember that little piece we took out before, the holding pin? That would be inserted next. That goes through the hole of the shaft, through the extra hole in the back end of the carrier, and then there's a little channel that opposes this channel here on the back, and it needs to be seated in there as well. Once that is done, I put a little lubrication, this time I'm using my fingers, on the top of the carrier, and then simply reseal the reel so that we reverse the transaction again. Before I go crazy, I always like to hold it with my finger to make sure it spins nicely, and it does, so that it's been well maintained. Next thing would be to replace the 3 cover screws, just as we kind of reverse the order there. and then tighten them down with your screwdriver. In this case, they're Phillips head screws, and only a couple of turns brings them back to the original part. Like anything else, real repair, you need to be a little bit sensitive to the touch and feel of the mechanicals. If you're working with a plastic-sided shield, in this case this is a metal jacket, but if you have plastic-sided shields, don't over-tighten the screws. That would put undue pressure on the main drive, and it would also tend to crack it if you get real brute force with it. And then we replace the handle. Then those handles had those two washers that are embedded in it, so we're going to go put those back in. And then this time it goes counterclockwise to put that back on. And then I like to test it again, and we have a nice turning wheel here. The last part I wanted to show you was the service of the drags in the spool itself. And from time to time, these things can get caught up and be the reason why somebody has given up on a reel or decided to sell it to a flea market because the drags wouldn't close down. The drags are located internally on the spool up top, and it's held in by a little tension clip. I use a little metal pin to pull that clip out, and then if you just turn it over and tap it or push it through, you can pull those drags out. And what you're checking for here is, are the drags sticking, or are the drags in any way broken that need to be replaced? You'll find that very common in like a pen reel that uses a fabric base drag. But in this case, these drags are Teflon. So there is a difference between the types of drags that you use. If you have a fabric drag, which is common in a pen reel, you would want to lubricate that. A Teflon drag does not require lubrication. Actually, lubrication will make it slip. So in this case, these are all free. I'm just going to restore them, put a drop of oil on them if you needed it, if they were sticky. But in this case, these parts are all clean, so there's no sense of doing any further maintenance with these. These are fine. And then you would restore it by using that little tension clip that goes in the groove inside the spool. You would mount the spool back onto the reel, and you would mount the drag knob on top of the spool. So that's it. It's not a very difficult thing to do once you get started with it. I think a lot of us that have done reel repair over the years were always hesitant, first and foremost, about taking that first screw out. And I'm not going to tell you all reels are this simple, but I am going to suggest to you that if you pick up a reel relatively inexpensively and it just needs some minor servicing to put it back in, that this is a good place to start, and I want to give you the confidence and the ability to go ahead and do it just like I did. So thank you very much for watching the video. It's my intention to put on additional videos over time dealing with some of the more advanced reels and some of the issues surrounding broken pieces and parts and how to get those and so on. But for now, I hope this gave you the confidence to go ahead and work on your reels that you have and the reels you may acquire over the course of time. Thank you.